Denny Hamlin has decided to appeal his penalty. He went on his show yesterday. What was his? I haven't listened to it. What was his whole thing?
His whole thing yesterday on Actions Detrimental was simply just explaining why he decided to go from not appealing, which he tweeted last week, to deciding to appeal. And he just explained the conversation with Coach Gibbs and the race team and what led to that.
I don't know how. I don't feel a whole lot of confidence
And then him winning the appeal?
In him, changing it whatsoever. I would fight it too. I mean, I feel like I would fight it too because I feel like whether he's got a case or not, the points are so important. He has to try to get some of those points back. And so if you can get the points back, even if you pay more fine, like Byron did last year, where his he had the same penalty as Denny and his got shifted away from points to more money, I think I'd be trying to make that happen. But I don't feel like I just don't feel like Denny has a ton of leverage here.
Maybe he doesn't have a ton of leverage, but he does have a lot of facts and data that he feels. And listen, he's not appealing this just to go through the motions and appeal and try to get points back. He thinks he will win.
He believes he believes in his case.
100%. He believes in his case. Yeah. And to be honest with you, seeing some of the things that I've seen since all then, I think he does have a case. And I think that there's a lot more writing on this appeals than just what we think. Just let's just try to get some points back. I think that this is a pretty big deal.
Another thing that I thought was fascinating is so HMS and Kaulig are appealing their penalties.
Yeah.
We had our own take on all of that last Tuesday or last Thursday, right? On our Thursday show.
Right.
So we after the penalties come out, and the feedback that I was getting immediately from our comments was, oh, y'all just love HMS. You're just an HMS fanboy. You used to race for them, and you're always going to be in their corner.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's fair.
It's true.
Yeah.
We used to race for HMS.
But then, all of the people at HMS, Chackenhouse and all them went and did some media at Atlanta. Kaulig was started to be more vocal about why they're going to appeal and how the process went down for them, right? Once everybody started hearing all of this information, I saw the tide change a little bit in terms of how people, just the general public's opinion of maybe how this might go, which was kind of interesting to me, maybe more interesting than the actual appeal itself and whatever happens with that. But
well, explain. What do you mean?
Well, I think that the details of HMS and what they think happened, and the issues that they perceive going on with the parts and the parts being
the part supplier,
the part supplier and all that. Kaulig coming in and basically backing all of that information up with their own opinions about the part supplier. They had one louver taken, one was okay.
Right.
So I think that I feel more. I feel better about their chance to win or change their penalty than the Denny penalty.
But you have more information on their thing. I mean, again, I think that it's all on how much evidence and how much data you can
I guess
compile.
I mean, but I'm just saying right now, Mike, that I think that when the penalty came down from HMS, everybody thought, if NASCAR says they touched this, worked on this little specific area and they're not supposed to, they're wrong. If they did that, they're wrong. Even if they said they could change the part to make it fit the car, if they touch this area they're not supposed to touch, there's nothing you can do. They got to be penalized. But I think that ever since, as more information came out and as HMS and Kaulig were speaking in the media this weekend, it seems to be sort of splitting public opinion 50-50 on who's right and who's wrong and what might happen here. I think that's fascinating. Usually it's all one-sided.
Really?
I feel like it usually is. Like the public feels like the teams absolutely got busted. It's maybe a little more understanding on what exactly the teams are doing or what they did to cheat, or that NASCAR's not correct in this decision. They don't, usually it's more one-sided.
The last time I felt it was all one-sided, it actually ended up going the other way, and that was with William Byron last year. And I thought when he got his penalty I thought they were dead in the water.
Yeah.
And then they ended up getting that back and rescinded. So I don't even pretend to know how appeals processes even go. I don't know what goes into it. I don't even know who's actually doing the hearing. Like who is it? It's a third party, I'm assuming?
Yeah. It's sort of this person that's not
a NASCAR
involved
person.
in it. They might have some history in NASCAR, but it's different. It's a different person.
Okay. Well, can I just say then on the Denny case, listen, I think if you go back and look at the reasons NASCAR cited, the words that NASCAR cited as a reason for the penalty, I do think there is a strong argument against it. And one is being that he manipulated a race. And a strong argument can be made on how every decision by every driver and every pit crew and everybody, 2 tires versus 4 tires, everything is going to manipulate the outcome of the race if that's how we're going to define it. So if we're going to penalize what manipulating of the race, then it opens up that can of worms to say, well, tell me something that doesn't actually manipulate the race. That's what you're out there to do. You're racing, right? So I think that's a slippery slope if you're NASCAR, and I think it can be argued. The other thing is on whether he intentionally wrecked him. Now, listen, Denny said what he said on his podcast. He didn't frame it right, and he might have actually been going, trying to be entertaining because he's, new at the podcasting thing, and so he's like, I'll let the wheel go, boy. But the data, I don't think actually supports that. And if you go look at it, nobody out there thought that anything egregious happened. And there's analytics, there's information pumped into them race cars that they can go pull them and see exactly where that wheel was. And if that doesn't support what Denny said on the podcast, there's an argument to be made that that penalty should not be levied, or at least it should be rescinded in some point. And that's all I'm saying. So I think he does have a compelling case.
Yeah.
He looked at it, and he said this on the podcast. When he looked at what they were penalizing him for, he says, I didn't do this stuff. I did not do it. And he calls Coach back and he says, Coach, I didn't do the things that they're saying I did. And then they go, well, you said it. If you say, well, you said it on the podcast. Well, then that's a different situation. They didn't say they penalized him for comments on a podcast. They said they penalized him for things on the track. If they came back and said, well, you said it on the podcast, well, that's a dangerous territory too. And that's where I really want to defend Denny because, listen, we got to be able to say things on a podcast. We got to be able to say things. And listen, Door Bumper Clear is going to say it. Denny's going to say things, and they're not always going to be factually accurate. And we're just going to say because we go off emotions and feelings. But that's also something that they haven't claimed that they're penalizing for podcast comments. And let the data speak for itself. I think Denny's got a compelling case, frankly. I really do. So, I hope he gets the points back for sure. I hope he does.
Yeah, I don't know. I get a little nervous about his chances.
Can I make NASCAR's counter argument real quick on one thing that I want to say, because I like to at least try to get both sides of the argument here. I do think NASCAR feels like they've let drivers. I put out a series of tweets last night that I'm like, I'm always going to want our content contributors and our drivers and our athletes and our stars to be able to speak their mind without any type of repercussions. And I know NASCAR feels like they do that already. And I think it's worth at least acknowledging that. Like they say, the drivers have been saying things for years and they don't get penalties for them. And things that, there have been times in the past where you've said something and you had a penalty threatened against you, but you didn't actually get penalized for it. And so I do think that there is some give and take in that. I do think NASCAR would probably feels like they're in a no-win situation because they're going to get beat up on and they're going to get ridiculed. I think that comes with the territory. You're the governing body. It just comes with the territory. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, if they have allowed drivers to speak their minds more often without penalty, it should be at least worth acknowledging that. I don't know that to be true. How could I? I'm not in those situations. I'm not in those boardrooms or whatever. But if that's what NASCAR feels like, it's worth at least saying that for our audience to be able to take into consideration.
Well, I think that NASCAR probably wishes that podcasters like ourselves and other, XM radio and all that would move on,
Well, yeah, that's dangerous.
I'm just saying, like, this is a storyline happening in the sport. Mm-hmm. And like I said last week, the penalties and whatever happens with all of this will have to be discussed because of how they change the points system going forward. You know, the points battles, right? As we get closer to the playoffs, you know, we're going to have to talk about these penalties and so forth and everything that went down with those, because they will probably be part of that storyline in the point system in the playoffs, and drivers making it, not making it. Maybe, you know, the HMS driver doesn't make it through to the next round in the playoffs, and we can draw a bead right to the points that they lost in this penalty if it all holds up. So, but anyhow,
well, that's an important point. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
They are making sure that the narrative continues.
Yeah.
With the points penalties.
Right.
If you just fined them or did something else, or maybe whatever you do, then it can go away. But points penalty is going to make sure that you, and especially as a broadcaster, has to keep bringing it up.
But I mean, you know, I don't not like I like them coming down hard when it's justified and somebody's done something wrong. Mm-hmm. I like them to do things that are going to deter this across the board and frighten the entire garage, right, from messing around in any gray area. And points are the one thing that is so precious to these teams. And so for years it was mostly monetary fines, and points were only done when it was such a severe situation. But now points are more common in these fines, and that's because NASCAR knows that that's one thing that the teams are really not willing to give up. They can find a way to pay that monetary fine. They can figure that out. They can make that work on the book.
Well, in Denny's case, he's got a $50,000 fine on him, and he's already offering to pay Josh Williams' fine, whatever that is. Yeah. So clearly, to your point, the monetary penalties don't really hit home very well like the points would.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's probably why. This conversation around Denny, Kaulig, HMS is so big, will continue to be so big, is because of the points involved in those penalties and how that will change the season for those teams moving forward, and how we're so captivated whether they will be able to appeal them back